Hello, today we will talk about another type of NNs. We will talk about convolutional neural networks, about convolutions, about training process, about notable architectures, and pitfalls. So, convolutional neural networks are used in CV tasks. They are popular in this field of research. Every picture contains a huge amount of pixels. Every pixel is the number. Why we don't just use fully connected neural networks for CV tasks? There are some reasons for it. At first, the full HD resolution image contains about 6 million pixels, and applying one fully connected layer with equal size will contain 36 trillion weights. So this number is bigger than any existing networks contained. It cannot be trained at all. One pixel doesn't carry a significant information about what is happening in a picture. What's more, after rotating and applying a color filter, the values of pixels change. We need to work with groups of pixels, because only them describe what is happening in the picture. So, this discourse leads us to the concept of convolutional neural networks. As I have already said, the NN's input size for CV tasks is really impressive. For example, when we are using grayscale images, the NN's input size is equal to the number of pixels. And what about color images? As we have already learned, there are some color spaces: RGB, BGR, HSV, LAB, etc. Every pixel is described by 3 numbers there. That's why the input size of neural network that works with color images is a product of the number of pixels and number 3. To sum up, one pixel doesn't contain any useful information, and input size of neural networks for CV tasks is really huge. That's why picture analysis requires enormous computing power. These problems make it difficult to adjust the weights. How we will deal with these troubles? The idea of neurons was taken from biological neurons. Let's look at the biological retina work. The primary light sensing cells in the retina are the photoreceptor cells, which are of 2 types, rods and cones, respectively. As you can see, they transmit signals to the bipolar cells that accumulate signals from other light sensing cells too. And it is only the first step of combining information received from groups of light sensing cells. We will apply this concept in convolutional nets. Let's look at a simple convolutional layer. It contains a kernel of convolution and a strategy that explains how this kernel will be applied to our picture. The kernel is a matrix in a simple case. The main point is to move this kernel across the whole picture and to convert values of pixels into new ones that make it possible to extract some helpful patterns. In this picture, we can see how our kernel is applied to the upper left corner of our picture. So, what will we do? We will multiply every value of pixel with every value of our kernel. Then, summing up this result and calculate the resulting value, the new value of the center pixel. In this case, it will be -8. Convolution layers are good enough feature extractors for visual data. These entities ideally cope with tasks of extracting useful patterns. The result of convolution layer is called feature map. In these feature maps, we can find some helpful patterns. What I wanted to say, height and width of resulting feature map will be reduced by 2 pixels. However, there are some parameters that can change the size of the resulting feature map. We will talk about them later. In addition, the kernel size is not a constant 2. We may change it depending on the task. It may be a rectangle. What's more, for multi-channel pictures, it is a rectangular parallelepiped. Where are the weights in these layers? The weights are the numbers that contained in our kernels. So we are training these kernels in convolutional neural networks. Here we can see a formula that describes convolutional layer. We can see a bias. This number is similar to the bias in fully connected networks. It will be added to the resulting -8 in the previous example. Convolutional layer is a linear transform. And as we have already learned, a composition of linear transforms is a linear transform too. So there is no sense in applying convolutional layers consistently. That's why we will use blocks that consist of our convolutional layer, activation function, and pooling layer. We will discuss pooling layers a bit later. There are some parameters that control the kernel movements. The first one, stride. It identifies the step of our kernel. The second one, padding, adding border pixels. And the last one, dilation. This parameter changes the strategy of calculating the resulting feature maps. We can look at how these parameters work. Here we can see different examples of using these parameters. The first one is example with no padding and no strides. Okay, and the resulting feature map that is green here will be reduced by 2 pixels. And after that, we will look at this example. Here we have padding, and padding is equal to 2. Yes, we have 2 border pixels here. Nice, there is no stride. Oh, stride is equal to 1 here. And you can see how it works. The size of the resulting feature map will be increased, as you can see. It will be more than the size of the previous blue feature map. So the next, half padding, or padding equal to 1, and no strides. In this case, the resulting feature map will be of the equal size. We can calculate it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it is true. Then, look at padding equal to 2 and no strides. It is like we can see here. Okay, the next one, no padding and stride equal to 2. Nice. Then here we can see a situation where padding is equal to 1 and strides is equal to 2. And the last one, padding is equal to 1, strides is equal to 2 here. Okay, and what about dilation? Dilation is depicted here. You can see how it works. What's more, as I have already said, the kernel may be 3-dimension tensor. And here we can see it. Here we apply a convolutional layer to color picture. You see, there is 3 channels, red, green, blue. RGB, respectively. And what's more, we are applying not only one kernel, we apply two kernels here. So it is the case where we can extract not only one feature map with our convolutional layer, we can extract two feature maps. That's why the result will be a three-dimensional tensor. And the kernel, in this case, will be a three-dimensional tensor. Let's look how our convolutional layers help us to extract features. What features we are talking about? It may be a color gradient, for examples, angles, corners, different lines, etc. And now we will look at vertical filter in one dimension. Here we can see two cases. The first one, filter with stride equal to 1, and the right one, filter with stride equal to 2. Our kernel of convolution is the array of three numbers, 1, 0, and -1. So let's do it together. 0, 1, 2. Okay, 0 is multiplied by 1, then 1 is multiplied by 0, then 2 is multiplied by -2. And the sum will be equal to the number -2. Then we're doing it with next three numbers, then with next three numbers, and further we're doing this operation too. It is the filter with stride equal to 1. And what about filter with stride equal to 2? We can see that the step of our kernel is increased. Here we take the first three numbers, then we take numbers from the last one. You see? From the 2. Okay, it is how this filter working. So here, this kernel is applied to two-dimensional data, our pictures respectively. It allows us to get this result, allows to highlight horizontal and vertical filters. So after applying the left side kernel, it is possible to get a feature map with highlighted horizontal lines. In the second case, we can get a feature map with highlighted vertical lines. These simple filters make it possible to get really useful feature maps. You can see it here. After these convolutions, we need to concentrate features, and we do it by reducing the size of our feature maps. It simplifies further feature extraction process. And how we reduce the size of our feature maps? It is made by pooling layers. There are different types of pooling layers. Average pooling, max pooling, mix pooling are among them. So the main point is to decrease the size of feature maps and to save helpful patterns for us. In max pooling, it is done by choosing the maximum number from each pixels group. It allows to increase the border intensity. In average pooling, it is done by using the average number from each pixels group. It preserves more information than max pooling. Okay, the size of our pixel groups depends on the pool size. In these examples, the pool size is equal to 2 by 2. And what is important, pooling layers do not contain the weights at all. Well, the simplest features were described here. We also can extract more complex features using convolutions. However, they are non-interpreted at all. We cannot explain why the convolution leads us to great results of our training process, because they are not interpreted at all. And it is the problem of neural networks methods at all. Here we can see a lot of different kernels that are trained through the learning for extracting useful features. Also, here we are solving the classification problem. We can see blocks that contains from convolutional layers, activation functions. Here these activation functions are ReLU, and pooling layers. We can see that after first conv layers, the car is still visible. But after the second conv layer, there is no car at all. And at the last layers, we analyze feature maps of low dimension. We make the resulting conclusion using this low dimension information. As we have already discussed, modern convolution NNs contain a lot of weights, and it is really hard to train them. It requires a lot of computing powers and a lot of data. It is really time-consuming. Thousands of pictures for modern big classifiers are required. However, here we have a solution. It turns out that a lot of useful patterns don't depend on the CV problems, and we can use already trained a model, a pre-trained model, for our needs. So we can use this pre-trained model and train only the last layers of it on our dataset for our needs. We're trying to decrease the number of weights that should be adjusted and decrease the volume of data that is required for high-quality training process. This procedure is called pre-training. There are different strategies for doing it. We can leave unchanged only the first layers of our convolutional nets, or we can leave unchanged all convolutional layers and train only a classification part of our network. It reduces the time of training process. So, and now let's look at notable architectures of convolutional neural networks. The first one will be AlexNet. This model was introduced in 2012. It showed great results in classification problems. This architecture consists of 5 convolutional layers and 2 fully connected layers. Adding fully connected layers is a way of learning nonlinear combinations of high-level features that are presented at the output of the convolution layer. Fully connected layers use feature maps that are extracted by convolutions. So, fully connected layers complicate and classify features by belonging to the final classes. In addition, after the first, the second, and the 5th convolutional layers, there are pooling layers that concentrate extracted patterns by reducing the size of feature maps. This model uses ReLU as an activation function. The next one architecture is VGG. It is a huge neighbor of AlexNet. It consists of 13 convolutional layers and 2 fully connected layers, respectively. The huge amount of convolutional layers allows to extract more complex patterns, features, and solve the more difficult problems of computer vision. Of course, the training of this model is really hard process because this model requires a lot of data and computing powers. VGG was implemented in 2014, and now we will talk about convolutional neural networks pitfalls. The network after training is precisely the result of the optimization problem that was formulated earlier. It minimizes the loss function to a neighborhood of one of the local minimums. And if the problem is well defined, the loss fits the problem. The dataset is representative and the training was performed correctly. We can expect the net to perform in a reasonable manner on the unseen data. Skip one of the steps and the whole setup will be corrupted. The next one, we should remember that the data must match the size of our convolutional neural network. The larger the neural network, the more data will be required for training. The problem of Husky and Snow. Let's imagine you are trying to train dogs classifier, and when there is snow in the picture, your model predicts every dog as Husky. The cause of this problem is that A lot of pictures with husky contains a snow, so it is easier for model to extract patterns of the snow rather than patterns of a husky. And the last example, let's imagine you are analyzing X-rays, for example, looking for tumors. It is important to understand that usually pictures with tumors are marked. And if you give the model X-rays with these marks for training, it is more likely that it will focus on them and recognize tumors by the presence of these markings. Your data should contain only raw information, and it is the conclusion. Thanks for your attention. That's all I wanted to say.